Instead, I decided to jump out of the window and build the airplane on the way down.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we have a special guest, Darren Sugiyama. He is the founder and CEO of Lionsmark Capital. Darren, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Lionsmark Capital, and what you do on a day-to-day?
Yep. I'm the CEO and founder of Lionsmark. We've been in the premium finance life insurance space for just about a decade. Got almost 24 years in the insurance business, and things have evolved quite a bit from 2003 when I first entered the insurance business. Built several companies along the way that have evolved into what we know today as Lionsmark Capital.
So I'm sure our listeners would be fascinated to hear your story. It's a very rich story. You started in, was it education, and worked your way all the way up to, hunting the whales of the life insurance industry?
Yeah, I started out as a high school teacher actually in Hawaii. And within that teaching career, did some counseling. I counseled inmates in prison as well as kids in lockup and detention home. Also ran a gang prevention program in my hometown of Long Beach, California. And the story is kind of a strange story. Once I got my master's degree in education, that's when I decided to walk away from the education, my career in education and went on kind of a search for different industries to get into. Spent some time in several different industries on the sales side, and then heard a crazy rumor about an old Little League baseball coach of mine that was making over $1 million a year in the insurance business. So I tracked him down in Newport Beach, California, went out and saw him after not seeing him for, geez, 20 something years, verified that the story was true, and thought if this guy could do it, then maybe I could do it. So I very naively got into the insurance business. And I think had I been a little bit wiser at that time, I would have gone and worked for somebody and learned the industry. But instead, I decided to jump out of the window and build the airplane on the way down, and went independent from the very beginning and started an agency. And yeah, that was kind of the very beginning of it. First year in the business, I still have my personal tax return for 2003 hanging on the wall right behind me here. First year in the business, my personal gross income was $277 for the full year. Lived
Oh,
off, lived off of credit card advances, and took a couple years to really kind of get in the flow of things. By my fifth year, we were doing a little over $20 million in annual recurring premium. Uh, by my seventh year, we were over 37 million. Wrote my first book called How I Built a $37 million insurance agency in less than 7 years. And then from there, decided to start a couple, I'll call them sister businesses. So we started another agency. The first agency was focused on employee benefits. Second agency was focused on voluntary benefits, and I ran that organization with my wife. And then the third agency we opened was focused on life insurance. So we were running three firms simultaneously under the same roof here in Orange County, California. Had a little over 120 agents or so, and things are going really well. And in the midst of things going really well, I had some people internally form a coup against me, and they set up shop literally across the parking lot from me, ripped out about two-thirds of our clients, which was two-thirds of our gross revenue. And I was stuck with this extremely large overhead, employees on payroll, and I had to decide what I was going to do. So one option was just to rebuild those three agencies back to what they were in all their glory, or the alternative was to really double down on this new venture, which was in the premium finance life insurance space. So we were doing a lot of life insurance business before. We were responsible for 25% of all the life insurance policies sold for Pacific Life in all of Orange County, 38% of Penn Mutuals. A lot of volume, but relatively small policies. As we started to deal with wealthier clients, we started looking at premium financing. So for those that don't know what premium financing is, it's when A life insurance policy gets so large, typically in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in annual premium per policy. Sometimes it makes more sense for them to finance those premiums through a bank, similar to, say, purchasing real estate with a mortgage loan. And so we started to kind of delve into that arena. And at first, we tried to outsource that type of business to premium financing experts. And after some very lackluster performance um, from some of those outsourced entities, we decided to build something internally. So that was the genesis of Landsmark Capital. And that was right around the time where um, essentially I got robbed by my ex-employees. So it was a pretty difficult uphill battle to build that in the midst of my other businesses, taking some pretty heavy hits. But here we are today, almost a decade later, and things are better than ever. We're one of the dominant players in the space, and the space is occupied really only by about half a dozen to a dozen legitimate players. But having more fun in business now than I've ever had. A lot leaner, a lot meaner, and not the volume of cases we were doing before, but the size of the cases is beyond what I would have ever, dreamed about doing 50 to $100 million death benefit, size cases.
Yeah. And I like what you said there. You said you're having a lot more fun right now. That wasn't always the case for you, though. Is that correct?
No, I mean, before you'd walk in our palatial office with this giant travertine, foyer and this gigantic fishbowl glass conference room and a sales floor that looked like something out of a movie like The Wolf of Wall Street or something. There was a lot of action and we did a lot of volume, and it was good for the ego. It was a good business financially, but I think the problem when you're dealing with that level of volume and that many people, you're bound to have some bad apples in the bunch. And it's a lot harder to manage that many people, right? So you've basically increasing your overhead, increasing your liability, increasing your risk. And at one point, I kind of felt like the tail was wagging the dog. The machine got to the size where we were more focused on volume of everything as opposed to really watching the quality of everything. And so, we had people that had kind of infiltrated our organization that were not the best people from an ethics standpoint, a value standpoint. And again, it's just a very difficult thing to manage when you're dealing with over 100 people in the organization. Today, we operate with about a dozen players on our team. Ironically, with a dozen people, we produce a larger gross revenue stream and a lot more profit margin than we did when we had, over 100 folks and, 7,000 square feet of office space and that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's like you said, the leaner and the meaner, right?
Yeah.
So I know you had a shift during one of these ventures and you had a tragedy strike your family. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The 2018 was where that coup was formed, and I faced that major betrayal. With Landsmark being relatively new at that time, we just had not hit full scale yet. We had some great years and some great quarters, but it just that business had not fully hit critical mass yet. So as I was going through that rebuilding process, it took longer than what I was expecting and would have hoped. And during that period of time, from a cash flow standpoint, and a net revenue standpoint, things got pretty difficult for us. And that's really an understatement. Things were really, really rough. When I went through that period, I realized that part of the damage, a good large majority of the damage, wasn't just financially, but it was emotionally as well. I felt betrayed. I was hurt. I was heartbroken. These people that I put so much time into and thought that we had such a great relationship. I found out greed on their part was more important than honoring the relationship. And so I really had to build myself and rebuild my spirit, not just rebuild the company and rebuild, things financially. And so when I went through that period of time, I started studying the value and almost the miracle of gratitude. So I started studying this gentleman named Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he referenced a scientist that won a Nobel Prize. His name was Dr. Robert Furchgott. And what Robert Furchgott found was that when you experience something, your hypothalamus, the part of the brain that interprets the experience and attaches a meaning to it, said that there's this link between um, interpreting the meaning of the experience and what your body produces hormonally. So, as an example, if you experience something where you feel fear or you feel threatened, your hypothalamus tells your body, "Hey, you're in danger right now," and your body will produce epinephrine or adrenaline, right? Kind of to create this fight or flight type of physical reaction. Conversely, when you experience something and you interpret it as something that you should be grateful for, your body produces oxytocin. When your body produces oxytocin, this kind of like miracle happens biochemically in your body. And you go into this mode they call endothelium-derived relaxing factor. And what that means is your smooth, soft, vascular muscle tissue relaxes and your blood vessels dilate. And so the largest muscle we have in our body that fits that description is our heart. So when we feel that sense of deep gratitude, our heart becomes engorged with blood, and we have this sense of fulfillment or this we feel full inside. And when we feel full inside, we want for nothing because we feel like we have everything that's important inside, right, in our heart. And when we want for nothing, the natural reaction is we feel more inclined to give. So it really changes the way that we approach life. It changes the way we approach relationships, changes the way we approach business even. And so that uh, coming into that understanding of how important that was, I started doing these gratitude meditations each morning. During a time where I did not feel grateful, I felt resentful and angry, and I was went to kind of a dark place during that time. But I found that forcing myself to do these gratitude meditations, I could find things that I could be grateful for in the midst of kind of business chaos and financial challenge. And so we all, regardless of how awful a situation that we can find ourselves in, we all have something that we can be grateful for. If you can walk, you can be grateful for the fact that you have the physical ability to walk. You can be grateful for the fact that you have a functioning brain and you can actually think and search for solutions to things. We can be grateful for our relationships, right? Our marriage, things like that. So that is really a big part of what kind of carried me through that and through the rebuilding process. Um, that was right around, let's see here, right around the pandemic. So
Mhm.
as we started to come out of the pandemic, the end of 2021 was that was the best quarter I've had in 20 something years of being in this business. 2022 was the best year I ever had. 2023 was even better than 2022. And so when I rolled into 2024, we had been able to pay off all the debt that we were in and had more money in the bank we've ever had before, and things we felt like finally we were over that hump, right? We faced so many challenges in the building process. And now it looked like we were going to enjoy some smooth sailing for once in a while. That summer, my 14-year-old son was visiting his grandmother, my mother-in-law. And to make a very long, tragic story short, unbeknownst to us, there was a loaded gun in my mother-in-law's house, and my son found that gun. And while on a FaceTime chat with his buddies, he started playing around with it and accidentally shot himself, and he died that night. That was July 3rd of last year, 2024. And when you go through something that tragic and that traumatic, for me at least, it made me really look at myself in the mirror and say, do you still believe in all this gratitude stuff? Because um, I'm not saying that I loved my son more than their father, but I can confidently say there is no father that ever loved his son more than mine, more than I love mine. And so, from a spiritual standpoint, um, from my what I believe spiritually, I believe he's with God, and he is not experiencing any pain, and he is experiencing more unconditional love and joy than he has ever experienced. But my wife and I are left behind here on Earth, and we are not in a better place. We're in a much more challenging place. I saw this incredible video that my wife sent me from another bereaved mother who lost her child. And she said she had found herself, even though it's not possible, asking, begging, pleading with God to bring her son back. And she said, in the midst of her begging God for that, she realized, how could I ask of that? I I wouldn't want to take heaven away from my son. And I thought that was so beautiful, right? That's the ultimate love that a mother or a parent can have for their child, assuming they believe in that from a spiritual standpoint, assuming they have those spiritual beliefs. Those are the spiritual beliefs that my wife and I share. And though we are emotionally crushed and struggle to get through the day emotionally and acknowledge how challenging this grief journey is from a spiritual standpoint, we know that our son is better than he's ever been. So when it comes to business, I tell folks, I can operate my business just fine. I can do a podcast and talk about it with you right now. I can speak on stage at conferences. I just spoke at two conferences over the last 2 weeks. But there isn't a day that goes by that I don't break down and cry. And it's been almost a year and a half. And I don't envision my that part of my life getting any easier because I don't envision me loving my son any less or missing my son any less. So someone once told me that the reason it hurts so bad is because your pain is commensurate with the depth of the love that you had or have for your child. So we've started a charitable foundation in memory of our son, the, called Life After Love. And the primary mission of the foundation is to provide the counseling and support services, the therapy to other bereaved parents that have lost children. So the way this all kind of ties into what I do for a living is, we say we're in the life insurance business, but really we're in the death insurance business. Yet no one really knows what to say to someone that just lost the most important person in their life. No one's ever trained. So I have a book that's my publishing date is March of this coming year. The book is called Grief Brain, and it's kind of almost like an instructional manual for folks, telling them what to say, what not to say, what they can do, what we recommend not to do when they try to support their grieving loved one. So the mission of my life and the mission of my wife's life, obviously have radically shifted, that we would have never imagined we'd have to go through. Yet at the same time, it's a very integral part of my business. I speak at conferences all over the country, and I'm now talking about this very painful subject, but very much needed subject. And I think to a certain degree, we're going to change. I don't want to say to change the world, but change our world, and change the world, people's world that are, surrounding us. So we're trying to turn tragedy into something beautiful. It's not easy, but I think it's really important. So even in the way that we communicate with clients, from a personal standpoint, it's evolved dramatically because we are in this kind of hypersensitive space right now where we understand the most important thing in life is not money, it's not power, it's not ego, it's your relationships, it's your family.
And I know you shared with me last time that you have touched people as you've gone to these conferences and spoken to them and really opened up their mind about, how they can cope with this stuff, how they can support other people with this stuff. And I don't know if you want to share just briefly about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it has been impactful in so many different ways. Usually, yeah, the crowds I speak in front of are usually anywhere from 150 to 250 people at a time or so. Every time I've spoken, about anywhere between 5 to 10% of the attendees will come up to me after my talk and sobbing and hugging me and telling me how they lost their child. I mean, this is not a demographic where you would think that experience, that human experience would be more prevalent. These are business people. These are folks in the insurance and financial services world. And one gentleman in particular really stands out. He came up and he was trembling and holding on to me for, a good, I don't know, 30, 60 seconds or so. And he was trying to say something in my ear. I couldn't understand what he was saying because he was so overcome with emotion. And after he finally let go, I don't know why I asked him this because I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I asked him, "I'm sorry, did you say you lost a child?" And he nods and he says, "I lost my son 4 years ago." And he tells me that that day was the first day in 4 years that he had cried for his son. And so there's this thing within our male population where men are taught that we're not supposed to cry. We're supposed to be the tough ones. We're supposed to be the rock for our family. This guy had all this unexpressed grief. And he said that by me sharing my story from stage, it's almost like it gave him permission to grieve publicly. I've had several other people reach out to me after my talks and say, I had one executive of an insurance carrier reach out and say, "Hey, the patriarch of one of my highest producing agencies just passed away, and I'm supposed to have dinner with the family this weekend, and I don't know what to say. What should I say?" I had another top producing advisor email me and said, "Hey, one of my close friends just lost his teenage daughter in a car accident, and I don't know what to say to my friend. What should I say?" And so I was able to give them some little tips, and these tips are not because I'm so brilliant or anything. These tips were learned by me through the incredibly kind and compassionate friends that I have that said things that I would have never thought to say. It's so valuable, so important. So that's one side of I think the value of me talking about this publicly. The other side as well is just how we operate in business. I was on a Zoom call with a prospective client just a couple weeks ago. We get all the way to the very end. It's a large policy, $30+ million policy. The mathematics of it made total sense for his estate planning. But at the very end, he says, I'm still not certain I want to do this. I said, "Okay, talk to me." And he said, "Well, option one is I do this and I leave behind, extra 30 million or so for my daughter. Option two is maybe I don't leave as much money behind for my daughter, but maybe I spend what I would have spent on this policy. Maybe I spend that to create memories with my daughter." And I felt compelled to share with him my story about my son. And I said, "You will never regret the dollars you invest in creating relationships with your daughter." I can say that I have no regrets on the time and the money I spent creating memories with my son. We traveled the world together. He had more experiences than most people ever experience in their entire lifetime. in just 14 years. And I'm not talking about just the fancy, expensive, trips to Paris and things like that. I'm talking about the time that we spent um, building Legos on a Sunday morning or going fishing, you know, which I never enjoyed doing, but my son loved fishing. And so we spent tons of time fishing. I never regret any of that. So I told him if you're worried that you're not going to have the budget to create those memories with your daughter, if you do this life insurance policy, I said, spend the money on your daughter. And he looked at me like he couldn't believe I was saying this, right? Because he's not used to insurance guys saying, don't buy the insurance, spend the money on your kids. So the conversation got a little bit deeper and we started uncovering what else other assets he had. And he had these four relatively large life insurance policies already in place. They were already set up in an irrevocable trust. They had more cash value than he really needs. And so we started running analytics of what would happen if he drew down some of the value of those current policies, cash values, to fund the new premium finance policy. As it turns out, he had about 7 million in death benefit. But by drawing down on the cash value to fund the new policy, the death benefit on his current policies went from 7 million down to 3 million. So he lost 4 million in current coverage, but we added an additional 30. So he went from 7 million to a total death benefit of 33 million, all by using his current policies as the funding mechanism to purchase the new policy. But I feel like, that's not a by me sharing that story with him, that's not a sales strategy. That's looking out for the client. Like, what is the client's true desires, right? Forget what the advisor's true desires are. Forget what my true desires are. What is the client truly trying to do? And I think by taking that approach with every client, only good can come from that. And if a client, if this particular client, if he didn't have those other policies and didn't have the funding mechanism to fund the new policy, and he would really rather take that money that he was going to spend on the policy and create memories with his daughter, I say create the memory with your daughter. You will never get a higher ROI on that. And I can speak very passionately about that because of the tragic situation that I'm in. We always think, oh, we'll always have tomorrow. We'll take that trip, we'll do that experience, I'll spend the time after I get through, fill in the blank. And the reality is tomorrow is not promised for any of us. And so living and operating our business with that intention and being more, I think, self-aware, aware of what the client's desires are, and being more compassionate to what the client is really trying to do with their life. Like I said, I think only good can come from that.
Yeah. And you touched me for sure. I love how you were able to connect with him, just human to human, hear what he needs and solve his problem. I absolutely love that. Where do you want to take this the next 6 to 12 months from now?
The I used to be so structured goal wise, and I had certain goals to hit and certain markers to hit on a certain timeline. I think most driven, accomplished people are tend to be more goal oriented. Since the passing of my son, all that's gone out the window. I'm purely living in purpose, today's purpose. What's tomorrow's purpose? Not quite sure. Probably be similar to today's, but today I'm focused on today's purpose. I am far less attached to financial outcomes. I'm far less attached to timelines. Before I was very adamant about I want to build this firm and I'm looking to exit at a certain age and all this. I could care less about that now. I'm finding though by being less attached to outcomes and less attached to timelines and focusing more on purpose. Financially, this is by far the best year I've had in over 20 years of being, in the insurance space. And I believe that ironically, part of it is because I'm less attached to outcomes. I live a great life, a very comfortable, great life. I don't worry about bills. Things are fantastic. in theory. I mean, I don't need more. I could do with a lot less. But the reality is I'm a hard worker. It's in my DNA. So I'm going to work hard. I'm going to put in the hours. I think I'm pretty good at what I do. And so the results, when you put those, three things together, for the most part, are pretty obvious. But I don't focus on any of those goals anymore. Purely focused on my life's purpose. And things seem to be working out better business wise with that type of approach.
Yeah, as you're aligned with that purpose, things just seem to fall into place, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, Darren, this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. If anyone wants to reach out to you, how would be the best way to do that?
Yeah. My so two websites I'll give you. My business website is lionsmarkcapital.com. Lionsmark capital.com. My personal website is darrensugiyama.com. DarrenSugiyama.com. You can see all my ventures and books and all the things that I do in addition to my core premium financing business there.
Well, thank you. This has been a very special podcast, especially for me. I love the world of finance. I can't imagine going through these things with my kids. And even when I do imagine that, I start crying. So I'll stop even thinking about it right now because I don't want to.
Oh,
Um,
one last website. The most important website, perhaps, is lifeafterlove.org. That's the foundation that we started in memory of my son. You can see all the impactful things that we're doing there.
Great addition. Thank you. And that wraps up this podcast. And don't forget to like and subscribe.